stop. Exit the traffic, turn off your engine, and tune in to words that will ease your mind.
That music you're hearing is from that group called Two Hand Union, Alyssa and Kent Simmons. If you want their music, go online and look up Two Hand Union, and you can download some of their music. I love music. I think it is one of God's wonderful creation is music. Well, we're not going to talk about music today. We're going to talk about money. And in this time that we have together, we're going to share some testimonies and experiences where we have seen God really miraculously meet our needs. And with me is Becky Whitinger. I'm so excited for her to be here, and I can tell that you folks are too. Our studio is full, and so let's just get into this. God is our source. I know Becky and I, a long time ago, decided that the source of my life, whether it's money, joy, peace, victory, the source of my life comes from God. Now, God being our source, there's a couple channels that he uses. One is men, women, or mankind, and the other channel is opportunities. There's a couple scriptures I'd like to read to you. One is found in Luke chapter 2, verse 52. It says, Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. You see, he increased, he grew. Prosperity, the meeting of your needs financially, doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. And it says that Jesus increased with favor with God and men. Not just God, but also men. There's something about the favor of God upon your life that influences others. And this is that channel that God will actually speak to other people to help you financially. Not with you asking them or even telling them your needs or anything like that. It just, all of a sudden, they'll just come up and say, look, I would like to help you with some finances or whatever. And Becky's got some stories about that. And tell one of the stories, honey, about that.
Well, as you've been teaching, or we've been talking about so much about money, and I know that then you've discussed a good deal about giving and tithing and being obedient to the Lord in that manner. And so I grew up in a Christian household that taught tithing from the time I was young. I tithed when I was a child. And then, when I'd get a job and when I got older, I've always given to God and been trusting him that his word then is true, because he says, there's a real comforting chapter 12 of Luke where he talks a lot about money, and he's talking about not worrying because he is the source and he has plenty. God is never broke. He's never worried about money. He's not stingy either. But he said, not to worry about what you eat or drink and not to have an anxious mind. And I know that money can create anxiousness faster than just about anything. But he said to give and provide. I like this part. Provide yourself money bags.
Yeah.
Money bags, which do not grow old, and treasure in the heavens that doesn't fail. There, no thief approaches, nor moth destroys. And so there's eternal treasure that comes out of that as well. And so I've always trusted God for my needs, no matter when in life. And as we've lived our lives together, God's done a lot of miraculous things. I know that he promises to meet our needs, and there's the everyday, paying the bills, paying the rent, the mortgage, buying groceries, providing for that. But then there are times that things come up that can be outside of the resources that we have, and we just don't have enough for a need that comes along. And so those are some of the stories I want to tell about how the Lord miraculously brought money from a different source, although He's the source, but He used people.
Yeah.
He always used people to help us. And I think one of the first ones I can think of that was really a supernatural type of miracle, we were living in Winslow. We had pioneered a church there, and God was moving. People were getting saved, and Jesse and Kevin, that's all we had then. They were very little. Kevin was probably still a baby. I can't remember, but they were little. But anyway, we had run down to the end of our money, and we didn't have any more. And we didn't have any groceries. That was the thing. But I wasn't worried. I don't know. I wasn't worried. I knew we weren't going to starve. God was going to come through some way. So I remember the morning I fed them the last of the oatmeal that I had.
Their last meal.
And a little while later, sometime that morning, I think it was before noon, a gal from our church came, and she said God spoke to her to give me this money. So she gave me a check for $300.
Wow.
And $300 then would buy a lot more than it does now. Back then, for our little family, that would have bought groceries for probably a couple months.
Right, right.
So the Lord abundantly blessed me in a need that I couldn't, I didn't have any way to get any food, and we weren't on any program with food stamps or any of that kind of thing. And I wasn't going to go tell anybody or beg neighbor to neighbor, can you share your groceries? But God spoke to someone, and they obeyed Him and brought in what we needed supernaturally.
Yeah, I think important is that when you have a financial need, you always have an answer when God is your source. And I encourage you to go to Him first. A lot of times the tendency is, if we have a financial need arise or something happens and you don't have the money, don't panic. That's why what you're saying, honey, about don't have an anxious mind. That is, it isn't like all of us worry. I'm sure we worry, all of us. It's not like you're supposed to go through life and never have an anxious thought, but yet Jesus is saying that. So how do I live without an anxious thought? That's where God is my source. He's the rock. So I can go to Him and then watch how He meets the need. See, it isn't just going to fall out of the air. He will cause someone to come and meet that need for you.
Well, the goodness of God includes, and I think that maybe we're not aware, we don't think about it this way, but God created us, each one individually, and He's given each of us giftings, talents, passions for certain kinds of things to do that we can operate in. And through those passions and giftings which God gave us out of His goodness, we earn a living. You know, we have family members that are, I have an engineer son, and I have daughters that are teachers, and others that work in managing construction companies and working in high-tech manufacture. I mean, God gives us talents to use, and that comes from Him too. That gives us the opportunity to work in a job that's fulfilling and make money at the same time. That's the goodness of God. Now, if you're in a job that you hate, then you need to pray and ask God to help you discover what talent you have so that you can be making money doing something that you enjoy and that you're gifted at, that you're talented with as well. But anyway, back to the stories. This is a little bit different one because it was kind of the cart before the horse. And one time we were living in Colorado, and we had a big conference, and we were working to prepare and to go through that conference, and it is a ton of work to conference and to invite hundreds of people, and it is a lot of work. And so you being on staff, at the end of it, our pastor gave us a bonus. And it was wonderful. I mean, it was more than a week's pay that he gave us. I think it was about $500. And we got that check, and I thought, oh, because we didn't at that time have a lot of what we call discretionary funds that you could just go buy what you wanted,
Right.
just spend it. And so I'm thinking about how we can use this, because we could definitely spend it easily. And I think the next day or so, our refrigerator went out. And I have to say, I was a little irritated with the Lord, because at first I thought, God, here I've got $500 and I could have spent it on some cool stuff, and I got to buy a refrigerator.
Yeah, really a bummer.
But I thought, if we didn't have that, what would we have done?
Yeah,
So he met the need before it got there.
Yeah.
And that was cool too. That was kind of unusual.
That's a great thought, that the need is already met. The Lord provides for you before you have the need. And I always kind of have a fun with this, because when God created man needed to have air to breathe. That was a great need. If we don't have air to breathe, we're not going to live very long. So God had already created air before the need came. It wasn't like Adam was created by God and he comes to or whatever, and he can't breathe. And God's, just a minute, let me get this met for you.
Let me create some oxygen.
Don't you may panic, but God never does. And so no matter what it is, no matter the need, and it's a great story, refrigerator. And then at times, we think, oh, wow, got to spend this money on a refrigerator. Well, go to God then and ask him, hey, how about a little extra money so we can go to a movie or a dinner? He loves you, and he wants everything but good for you. And I remember the Lord a while back, he spoke to me, and I didn't really think it was him, but he had to say it more than once. He told me that he's not trying to make life harder. And at first I said, really? Life is hard, and that is true. But God is trying to make it easier. He's trying to show us a way through this hard life where it isn't as hard as sometimes we're experiencing. It's almost like if you're going to climb a mountain and you're going to just go up this cliff, and someone comes along and says, hey, well, I know a better way of getting up the mountain. There's a trail over here that's a lot easier to climb. So the mountains there, hard life, the obstacles, the unexpected things that happen are hard. They're difficult. But God is not trying to make it hard. He has actually already provided everything that you may need.
Well, another one that's a little similar to that happened a few years after the refrigerator. We were here in Flagstaff, and I was training as a midwife. And one of the education requirements for my license was a university level anatomy and physiology class. And so I had checked into NAU to see how much that would cost, and tuition NAU, more money than I had. And so I'm praying about it, and wondering, well, God, do you even want me to train as a midwife? But I was very passionate about it. But anyway, the gal came to me from church, and we'd known her for a few years. And this is where I think God he had already reserved the money for me, because she said, Becky, I want to give this to you because I've had it for several years. And I just I've been sitting on it, not knowing exactly what to do with it. It's kind of the leftover of a little bit of an inheritance that I got from my dad when he passed away. And so I've been praying about it, and I feel like I need to give it to you. Well, I had never told anybody I needed tuition money. She didn't know, but she gave me a check for around $1,500, I think it was, and that was exactly what I needed for 2 semesters of anatomy and physiology.
Oh, wow. And that's
in order to get my license, which opened up a huge panorama to me, a huge horizon that I could see. I could walk into my passion. I loved midwifery, but I had to have that class
Yes,
to get
yes.
my license. And so the Lord provided a way, but He had already set it aside, and He just kept it in her account till I needed it.
And that's something. I've always think about how God orchestrates all that.
Mhm.
He knows everything. He knows what you're going to need before you have the need. He's working behind the scenes. And so, folks, don't be encouraged. We really, by telling these stories, we're not trying to brag. Our bragging and boasting is about God. And your God is our God. We only have one God, one Father, and He's good to all of us. He is not a respecter of persons. The stories we tell is really, it's to encourage you. But as we're sharing these stories, I get excited about it because God, it's like we should remember when you're facing a debt. Okay, here's an idea for you. You're facing some real financial need. Maybe it is you're wanting to go to school, and you may say, "Well, I can't because I don't have any money." No, no, no. God has the money, so you go to Him. But in preparing for that, sit down with someone, and if you're married, especially husband and wife, like even what Becky and I are doing, we're sharing stories. And all of a sudden, you just get excited about what God can do. So that remember what God has done for you. Talk about all the blessings and think hard about it. Not just the big things, but even the little things. $50 here, or you needed a tank of gas, and someone said, "Hey, let me get you gas today." Someone buys you breakfast. Those are all coming from God through the channel of people.
They are. We just don't often recognize that. And I think the Lord wants us more and more to see, to broaden the horizon of what is good and what is God's goodness to us. I mean, He provides things that we don't necessarily, we're not necessarily thankful for until we look at them. When we look at, the beauty that He's created, just the beauty of the earth, the beauty of Flagstaff. We live in one of the most beautiful places on the earth. Sedona, the Red Rock, I mean, there's so much, and He gives us, like you said, air to breathe. I got lots of flowers in my backyard. Those are beautiful to me. So, I mean, we could go on and on about those kinds of things that are not cash. They're not necessarily have a monetary value.
Right.
But God is good, and He's good to everybody. In Luke, He says that He's kind to the unthankful and the evil. Mm-hmm. He is. And He makes His sun rise on the evil and on the good, and He sends rain on the just and on the unjust because He's good. And there are a lot of people I see that have money, they got stuff, more maybe than me even, but they don't know God.
Yeah.
And His promise, that's what the real point is. His promise, though, is to me. He's promised me that He'll meet my need in every way, the everyday stuff or the crisis or the unexpected. He will meet my need because I belong to Him. Those other people, they're just under His goodness, and out of that goodness, they should turn to Him. But He promised me. He didn't promise the world He'd meet their need, really.
It is a good point. And it's sad because people that look to the Lord as their source, they have to look to man and what he can do, whether it's government or your job or whatever, and then they don't have an avenue to be grateful. I want to tell this story that really demonstrates why the Lord uses others to meet our needs as a channel. God He could have a bird fly into your house with $500 every month. I mean, he could do anything, but He chooses man because He's after something more than just a physical need being met. We were going through really one of the hardest times of our life, and I was so discouraged. I didn't have it in me to believe or to just really go on. I just wanted to lay down and just quit. And I remember one day we got our mail, and in the mail was a card from someone that we know. And I opened up that card, and there was a little note written, and I can't even remember what was written, but what was in the card was $1,000. That I I had that money, looked at it, and I began to cry because it wasn't just the money. If it was just about $1,000, well, how long will that last? You know, if you have nothing, $1,000 is you, man alive, that's not very much. But because a person, and I know this person, all of a sudden there's a change of relationship and gratefulness, and it caused relationships to grow. Money is such a fantastic tool. We always use that term, money is not the end all. It's a tool. And it's a tool that not only brings a great understanding of God and his love for me, but also for other people. When they give like this, and that even the lady that you spoke of, honey, that gave us that $500, there were a young couple kids. We don't have any money. And we still remember that person today, even 50 years later. A good friend and great person. Wasn't 50 years, maybe 20 years later.
Well, a couple other things I'd like to tell or to relate, a couple other stories. One of our kids was going to college, and that was an extra expense, and we didn't have the tuition. So but the thing is, see, we always trust to God because we have given. I know I can go to God because he said, if you give, I'll open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing, the good out of my good treasure. So anyway, we were at a church that you'd never preached at before. You've always preached at other places for our whole ministry, whole adult life. And they do give, normally they receive what we call an honorarium or a love offering to give, for the ministry that you do there. But this church went above and far beyond anything you had ever received before. It was so much more that we were astonished. And it was what he needed for tuition that semester.
Yeah.
And they didn't know that. We never told them. And, it was just the Holy Spirit moving behind the scenes, and it paid his tuition. But the cool thing was that after that, he had, I would call someone a benefactor that stepped up and paid his tuition the rest of college. And then our next one, our daughter, went with that benefactor as well. So our three kids, one of them went on a lot of scholarship money and other ways. But those kids all got degrees without debt. And to me, that's a real miracle.
It is a miracle when you have three children go to college, graduate, and they graduate without debt.
Well, this is a funny story. I mean, it's just comical because I thought, God, you're just too much. We had come to Flagstaff, bought the house that we bought with a miracle. We could do a whole talk about that, but I won't. It was miraculous how we were able to buy a house because we didn't have any money. Again, that's why it's, you cannot have anything and still have plenty. You cannot have cash, but God can move, and he still provides all the things that you need. But anyway, we bought the house, and a couple years, I think, went by, and we realized in a windstorm that a bunch of the shingles were blown off, and it was the original roof, never been re-roofed, I guess. So we're thinking, oh man, we need a roof on the house. We have to, because it's coming apart.
Yeah.
So we prayed, and we'd always been faithful to God and trusted him. And lo and behold, we have a roofer in our church that came up to you unbeknownst to, well, he came up and said, hey, Joe, do you know anybody who needs a roof? A free roof.
Yeah, And I can't remember, honey, how long was it? It wasn't when we really looked at our roof, and I said,
It was
man,
bad.
I don't know the span of
It
time.
wasn't very long, but when he said that, you said, yeah, I do. And he had put a roof on someone's house and they didn't like the way it looked. They didn't like the color scheme or something. And so they wanted to take it all off, which he did, and he gave it to us.
Yep.
And so God can provide without cash.
Yes,
But
yes, he
that one's
can.
one of the funniest ones. I mean, who walks up to you and says, do you need a roof?
Yeah.
The week after you realize you need a roof. And you don't have any money.
And why he would ask me, do you know anybody who needs a roof? And there I am. Yes, you know what? I need a roof. And so God is really wanting to make life a little bit easier.
We were trying to sell our house, and we realized that to sell it, it was a little bit complicated. We were calling a bedroom that wasn't technically, you couldn't legally call it a bedroom. We were going to have to remodel it, or we wouldn't be able to sell it for nearly as much. You know how all that works with real estate. So we needed to remodel it, and it was going to cost us about $10,000. Mm-hmm. And, we didn't have $10,000. So right during that time span, we went back east for a meeting back there in Philadelphia. And at the end of the meeting, they handed you the honorarium. Do you remember that?
Yes.
They just handed you an
Yeah.
envelope,
Yep.
and we left, or we went back to the room because we were getting ready to leave to pack up and go to the airport. Opened up the envelope, and it's $10,000. And they said, God spoke to us to give you this amount of money. And we were just flabbergasted. I remember having to sit down because nobody had ever given me that kind of money before, but they were so generous.
Oh, it was amazing.
They obeyed God.
Yeah, that's the other part of it.
And God, I know them. God has blessed them with their own stuff, their family, their finances. God's blessed them. But knowing, we never told them anything about this need. So God does things without you. You talk to Him, then He talks to people.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. And to remember that you're not the one that have to convince people. Don't try to manipulate. And sad to say, Christians can be very, very good about manipulating and trying to look like you're poor and singing the poor blues, and you're trying to tap somebody's goodness. Put on Christ. Look wealthy. Talk wealthy. Don't go around looking poor, because you have the richest Father ever. He owns everything. He's rich.
And I think, as you mentioned before, this thing really is a process too. It's not something you learn overnight, and it does take time as the Lord builds wealth in our lives. And as we learn to trust Him, like you said, we go back and look at all these times that God met our need, because then we face a bigger one. There's usually a bigger need. They don't get smaller. And so then you look back and think, okay, God, you did it this time and this time and this time and all these times. And so I know if you met that need, then you can meet this one. Because I look at the history of that and the cash amounts, actually, the money, and I realize that it has increased over the years of what we needed. Well, the God can match that need. Mm-hmm. He's not limited to that $300 for groceries, and that's all you ever get. God has plenty.
Yes, He does. And that's why I really encourage everyone to talk about how good God has been to you, the needs that He has met. And there's one more thing that Becky's going to tell us.
One more, and I'll go quick. But this is probably the biggest thing that ever happened to us. The most miraculous, maybe I could say. But about 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago, our lives suddenly were upended. And suddenly, overnight, our livelihood was removed. Our means of a livelihood was taken away in a moment, in a day. In one day, it was gone. It was like having all we needed and waking up the next morning And there is nothing. There's no income. There's no way to generate any income. There's no way to make any money. And so after decades of serving God, trusting God, and Him meeting our needs, always giving, even at times when we really, it's pay the electric bill or pay your tithe, we pay our tithe and then God to take care of the electric bill. But anyway, through the next couple of years, God, within 2 years of that day, we had a brand new house, big house, beautiful home, paid off, debt-free. We had bought a brand new car because the other car was pretty old, had lots and lots and lots of miles on it. We decided to buy a brand new one, and that was paid off. So within 2 years, we were basically debt-free, even after we had lost our means of income completely. And the Lord did that. I could go through all the intricacies of how it happened, and in other ways, it's like, I don't know how it happened. But God did it, and it was supernatural.
Yes.
It was supernatural.
He does. And so in the problems that life may bring, and I hope no one really has to go through what Becky and I did, where you go to bed with great security in a lot of ways, and then you wake up with nothing. But God is the source, and the channel changes. That your job, you may lose your job tomorrow. That's a channel. So you lose your job, you go to your source. You go to your source, who is God. So I encourage you folks. I hear the music beginning to play, and this ends our time together today. And so I look forward to our next get-together where we can continue about talking about the goodness of God.